A student gets a problem right. A hard one. They've been working on it for a few minutes. The pencil's moving and erasing and trying again. And they land on the correct answer. And the teacher sees it, smiles, and says warmly and genuinely, with real pride, "See, you are so smart. I knew you could do it." And the student smiles, sits up in their chair a little straighter. For about 30 seconds, everything is wonderful. Then the next problem appears on the board. Slightly harder, slightly different, the same concept. And the student looks at it and something shifts. Within 60 seconds, that same student raises their hand. And the teacher is genuinely confused. They literally just did this. What happened? That's what we're talking about here today. Because what happened is the language. And the language in a mathematics classroom is never just language. It is the curriculum underneath the curriculum. The one students are reading, even when nobody's teaching it. Welcome to Show Me the Math Receipts. I'm Asali Smith, founder of Number Navigators, and this is episode 5. If you were with us for episode 1, where we talked about how "I'm just not a math person" gets built, this is the natural next conversation, because that belief does not appear out of nowhere. It gets constructed word by word, interaction by interaction, over years of language that was never examined closely enough. The foundational research here belongs to Carol Dweck and her colleague Claudia Mueller, whose studies in the late 1990s changed everything about how we should think about praise in classrooms. Here's what they did. They gave students a set of moderately challenging math problems. And then, regardless of how the students actually performed, researchers gave one type of praise to them. Half of the students were told, "You must be really smart at this." The other half were told, "You must have worked really hard at this." Then they gave students a choice: attempt a harder set of problems that would stretch their thinking, or attempt an easier set that they were more likely to get right. The students praised for being smart overwhelmingly chose the easier problems. And here's why that matters. When your identity is built on being smart, the risk of looking not smart becomes intolerable. Challenge stops being an opportunity and starts being a threat. The students praised for effort overwhelmingly chose the harder problems. Because when your identity is built on what you do rather than what you are, difficulty is just the next thing to try. But then it went further. When Dweck and Mueller gave all the students a genuinely difficult set of problems, the smart praised group showed significantly higher discouragement, significantly lower persistence, and when asked to report their scores to a peer, many of them lied. They inflated their scores because the identity built on being smart could not absorb the reality of struggle. And what that means is the phrase, "You're so smart, said with love and said with the best of intentions, is quietly building a mathematical identity that will fracture the moment math gets hard, which it will. It always does. And then there's the other layer to this, because the research goes even deeper when we look at who receives what kind of praise and why. Claude Steele's work on stereotype threat shows that students from groups who have historically been told they don't belong in mathematics are particularly vulnerable to the effects of ability-based praise. When those students were told they were smart and the mathematics gets hard 30 seconds later, the stakes of that struggle are not the same as they are for a student who has never had to wonder whether difficulty confirms something larger. The weight of that context does not disappear because the praise was kind. The language we use is never just about the individual student in front of us. It is always operating inside a larger story about who has historically belonged in mathematics and who has not. So let me come back to that classroom. The student who raised their hand 60 seconds after being told they were smart, here is what happened in those 60 seconds. The student's brain did something completely predictable and completely invisible. It recalibrated around the new identity it had just been given. Smart. I am smart. That is what I am. And smart people know the answer. Smart people don't sit here confused. So if I'm sitting here confused, if this feels hard, then maybe the smart thing was a fluke. Maybe I need help before anyone finds out. The hand did not go up because the student could not think through the problem. The hand went up because the identity built on being smart couldn't afford being wrong. The cost of struggling for a student who has just been told their value is located in their smartness is too high. So they opt out before the struggle can cost them anything. And the teacher has no idea because they were encouraging. The praise was real because the student smiled and because nothing in that interaction looked like harm. That is what makes this so hard to see. And that is exactly why we have to look. If you're a classroom teacher, the shift I'm describing does not require you to stop praising students. It requires you to change what you praise them for, not what they are, but for what they did. And so instead of, "You're so smart," something like, "I noticed you tried 3 different approaches before that one worked." And that is exactly what mathematicians do. Or, "The way you explained your thinking just now showed real depth, and that comes from the work you've been putting in." The difference, it's not complicated. It just requires intention until it becomes a habit. If you're a math coach, praise language is one of the most accessible entry points for professional learning conversations because no teacher is defending harmful praise. They simply have not examined what their praise is communicating underneath. When you can share the research and offer specific replacement language, you are giving someone something that they can use the next morning. That is the kind of coaching that builds trust and changes practices at the same time. And if you're an instructional leader, listen for praise language in your walkthroughs, not as evaluations, but as information. What teachers say when students get something right and what they say when students struggle tells you everything about the beliefs sitting underneath the instruction. And beliefs, as we've said from the very first episode, are where everything starts. Here are your Wednesday morning receipts. Two things this week. First, do a praise audit. No, we're not going to church, but do a praise audit. For 1 full day, notice every piece of praise you give a student in your math classroom. And at the end of the day, ask yourself, was that praise about what the student is or about what the student did? Ability or action? Fixed trait or chosen behavior? That question alone will start changing how you speak, because awareness always comes before change. And you cannot change what you haven't seen. The second, change how you respond to struggle out loud in real time. When a student hits difficulty, try this instead of reassurance. This is a hard problem, but hard problems are supposed to feel hard. That feeling is not a sign that something's wrong. It's a sign that your brain is doing exactly what it needs to do. That reframe, delivered calmly and consistently, starts building a classroom where struggle is not evidence of inadequacy. It's evidence of learning. And over time, students stop needing you to say it because they start saying it to themselves. Every word in a mathematics classroom is a vote. A vote for a particular belief about who students are and what they're capable of. And those votes, they accumulate over days and weeks and years into the story a student tells about themselves as a mathematical thinker. That story can be one of fixed ability that fractures under pressure, or it can be one of growing capacity that strengthens through challenge. And what determines which story a student carries is not their innate gifts. It is, in significant part, the words the adults around them choose. You have more power in this than you may realize, and now you have the receipts to use it as well. Next time, we're talking about what has to exist before any of the practices that we've discussed can actually take root. Psychological safety. What it actually means in a math classroom, what it looks like and sounds like when it's present, and what it costs when it's not. Episode 6 is called Safe to Struggle, and it is going to change how you think about your classroom environment from the ground up. I'm Asali Smith. This is Show Me the Math Receipts. And until next time, teach boldly, protect student thinking, and always, always keep your math receipts.